Hello to our New Zealand listeners. Powrsuit is coming to a city near you. If you're in Wellington, Christchurch or Auckland, we've specially designed a 4-week program to help you bust through those beliefs and habits that are holding you back. Come and join some of our very first leadership cohorts in June and July. We even have an email template to help you get professional development budget. So reach out at hello@powrsuit.com and we look forward to meeting you in person. Welcome to Powrup, the podcast that uncovers the unique challenges women leaders face today. Join your hosts Nat and Kristen as we dive into the tough topics and provide actionable insights you can apply right now. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Hello, thanks for listening. Today, we're going to chat all about advancing your career by building your own personal board of directors. Because last week, we spoke about considering a move into governance and the reasons why you might and the reasons why you might not. But a board of directors isn't just for an organization. You can and should create your own board of directors to guide you in your decision-making and career development.
This is all part of our mission to give you the tools and confidence to build a career on your terms. Having a personal board of directors is a great way to get career support and advice from people you trust. Probably around 5 to 10 people, do you think, that you assemble for the purpose of developing and navigating your career, and these can probably change over time.
Yeah.
So why do you reckon we have one? Why should you have one?
Probably the one most powerful one is to bounce ideas, because most of the time you have an inclination of what you should do and what your next step could be. Not necessarily specifically, but you have an idea when it's time to move on. You have an idea if you're unhappy, if you feel stuck. And having a group of people, trusted confidants that you can go to and go, I need some advice. I need some feedback. So this goes back to the heart of the matter, which is feedback. Feedback is so critical. We have a couple great articles on Powrsuit.com on feedback, why it is so important to actually go out and actively collect, because it is so powerful to have people who have your best interests at heart, that want to see you develop, that want to give you advice and input regarding your career.
Absolutely. And I think when you just said before, we know when we're unhappy or stuck, that's not always been true for me. And I think leaving Hatch, I was deeply unhappy and deeply stuck. And I remember 6 months out, leading up to Christmas, I announced that I was going to start going to therapy and put in place a couple of other things to endure the next 6 months of my life, because I was so stuck. I couldn't see that I was basically trying to address a whole bunch of symptoms rather than the cause of what was causing me great distress at the time. And my personal board of directors really solved that for me, because that feedback thing, absolutely, but a totally different perspective. And we've sort of talked about it in other podcasts, but from having this fresh perspective, because quite often when you're in something, what do you say? You can't see the wood for the trees. You're in it and someone will just come out with something. And especially when they know you and they have your best interests at heart, they have this incredible ability to shortcut and short circuit some of the things that you may not even know you're stuck on.
Yeah.
If you're anything like me. Or are you always aware of it?
I've always woken up and known when it was the time. When it was time to do something different, when it was time to put my hand up. That's me, but I know that's not a universal thing. But I need people to bounce that off of. And quite often it's by the third or fourth conversation, they've either given me the confidence to go and do it, or they've kind of said, ooh, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? So yeah, I don't know. That's how it's operated with me. Now, we are suggesting this isn't a board of directors that has to meet together, firstly. That's the first thing. I mean, there might be some people that literally have a board of directors that meets as a group and you go, I'm assembling you people. I want to meet once a month. But I would say that there are different hats that the board of directors can wear, and we're going to chat about those shortly. There's a few different roles that can sit on your board, but they do not have to meet together. I just thought we should make that clear.
Well, and also if anyone's just come from listening to our chat about governance, decisions. They also aren't legally or ethically
Yes, they are.
responsible for any decisions they make. But what they can do is help you find out your greatest strengths and skills, which again, we've talked about quite a lot, that actually quite often we don't actually know what they are. And I remember going to leadership training years ago and learning about your gifts. And those are things that you were not just good at, but you loved to do. And quite often we can get sucked into the trap of doing things we're good at, even if we don't really love them. That blind spots thing is a big one. I think we all have blind spots. We should give up pretending we don't. We have gaps, and one of the greatest joys in life is finding out a blind spot and going, oh my goodness, this is so weird. I had no idea I did that. And I've actually had that years ago. And one of my friends, who was actually on my personal board of directors at the time, still a great friend now, said when I was deeply distressed about something, I would laugh. I would do this like awkward laugh. And she was like, I can always tell that you're really upset when you do this laugh. And so I'm going to respond in this way when you do it, which I think is really cool. You can learn their approaches. I love the different leadership styles. We are huge fans of recognizing that we currently in the world tend to focus on this one narrow definition of leadership, and having this board of directors, you can learn from experts and experience of people around you at different ways of dealing with it. Yes. Any other ways you'd look at using them?
I think specific feedback is what I've used different roles of board of directors for, my personal one, and that is just a sounding board on an area that I could focus on, or if I've often debated, do I go down the specialist route in my career, or do I stay as a generalist? And so things like that, getting feedback on that. Sounding board for making career decisions. I think I spoke in our couple podcasts ago about going to who I would definitely see as a coach for me. When it was time for me to move on from a role, that person walked me through the different options I had at the table and helped me work through the outcomes of each of those. And opening up their networks is a final, really powerful way to use your board of directors. And people want to help and they want to connect you. Often if they've said yes to informally or formally helping you, that they know that means connecting you with people in their network, and quite often are quite happy to do that. So
it's a classic sales strategy, right? Get them to emotionally buy in, and then you've got them to do whatever you want,
and then solve all your problems. So let's chat about the different roles that you can start to surround yourself with as part of your board of directors. We talked about 5 to 10 people. That can change over time. You might start with one, you might start with a handful. It might be formal, it might be informal, but the different roles are mentor and mentorship. We'll chat about that. Sponsorship, which is quite unique. Coaching, that is another role that you can have on your board of directors. And then finally, a peer group. Will close that out at the end. But I think we'd probably just start with mentorship and jump into what that is, Nat?
Yeah, and we've had a bit of a debate about this on what defines a mentor, and settled on. A lot of organizations will have a structured program for mentors. A lot of people reach out and ask someone specifically to be a mentor, and it's very formal. In my experience, I've had that once. I had a business mentor very early on in my career. I've talked about it before, where I thought I was failing. They came in to mentor, did a lot of evidence-based analysis to tell me that I wasn't failing. But actually in my life, I've largely had informal mentors. So I don't think either of those should be a barrier. Some people really like the formality of having a real structure. Other people like to just have a bunch of people on tap. That might be 3 or 4 people they go to one-off or in different situations. But now I've gone into sort of the rules around mentors. What are they?
Well, a mentor typically is someone who you're reaching out to them because they have been there, done that. It might mean they are a couple years, or maybe even 5, 6, 7 years ahead of you in career. You admire them. They've been through a lot more than you might personally have, or they've seen a lot, they've experienced a lot. You might know specifically, I know they've been through a situation like this, and be reaching out for them for that purpose. But the whole point is that I don't want to say it's like it's a senior junior kind of relationship, but it kind of is. Like, you are going out and asking for advice from someone who is more experienced because they've been there and done that, and they can help you. So that's the first distinction.
I would just say on that, they don't necessarily need to be senior in their career. They just need to have experience in something that you don't. So they could be actually the same level or actually below you, but they have specific expertise, or they've honed a skill that you might want, like professional public speaking, or empathetic leadership or negotiation. And so they are an expert or have far more experience in a particular thing that you want to learn about.
Yeah.
So again, don't be put off by seniority and levels. Think about what you might want to learn. Think about kind of either broad or specific skills and find mentors based on that.
Yeah, that's so true. In a formal corporate environment, what you typically have is you've got senior execs or senior leaders in a particular organization that commit to mentoring someone slightly more junior because they want to build the pipeline of that organization. They want to see that person get up to their role. So that might be two skips up. And so they're helping them navigate moving from manager to leader. They might be helping them how to storytell for stakeholders. And so they've got a very formal role. They might meet monthly. And the whole goal is to get that person to where they are. But you're absolutely right. We've got a great friend she's insanely young, and she runs a public speaking business. And we would absolutely go and ask to be mentored by her to learn how to speak with presence at an organization.
Absolutely.
Miriam, she's incredible. So mentors do it because they want to give back. And they have that real desire to help others. They've probably been helped along the way. And mentees do it because they, at that point in time or on a specific issue, they need the help.
And I think the key thing here is there's some, in a non-formal situation, there's some form of emotional connection. So this tends to be an unpaid position. This is very much, they have emotionally bought into your success. So for me, one of the biggest mentoring times I have a very good friend. And it's funny because often my mentors are friends. And I was going through a massive negotiation. I was trying to negotiate in one of the most complicated and stressful negotiations I'd done. And he was on the phone to me over about a month, probably a couple of times a week and I would call him before and after I went in and had sessions, and that was an extremely effective mentorship. I think in the end might have bought him a bottle of whiskey, probably forgot. We have a long friendship behind us.
But it is unpaid.
But that was all because he's done that for me multiple times in my life, actually mostly in negotiation, and has just been there when I've needed him. And then we'll hang out again for a while. And the power of that in my life, and the couple of times that I've called on him, it has been in depth, it has been continuous for a short space of time, and so valuable. It has transformed my life in those times. And he gets nothing out of it other than knowing that he has had a massive impact on,
which is a big thing for people, so it's not like he gets nothing out of it.
I mean, I really paid him back with just knowing what a good Samaritan he is. And I have a bunch of them, like Rachel, for example, who gave us even this term. I consider her an informal mentor. I often go to her almost as, in some ways, like a bit of a cheerleading mentor of just like, oh, I'm grappling with this thing, and always knows she'll have this words of wisdom. She works in people leadership, so she has expertise in an area that I don't know as well, in terms of setting up a whole organization with capability structures and all that sort of stuff, and just having those people to grapple with. But I've only ever had one formal mentor, and I don't even think you've had any. I haven't
had a formal mentor, and nor have I formally mentored or had a mentee, and that's just, I have been asked, but I just say, look, I know the commitment that's involved in this, and I would take it very seriously. It's time commitment. It is opening, networks and really ensuring the successful outcomes of that person. And probably I was asked at the wrong times in my life, but I've always said yes to a coffee or informal mentorship. That takes a lot of pressure off me. I'm like, oh, then I'm not responsible for another human being right now. So it's not selfish reasons other than I just haven't had the time to give a proper mentorship, formal relationship. So I've said yes to informal things. I've met people for lots of bouts of advice. But one thing, because we did do a talk on, was it self-beliefs and just all about our lens and our bias of the world? And that's one thing to remember. And let's jump to coach next to Nat, because I think it's a really nice opposite of this, is mentors will give you advice. Like, they will tell you based on their experience and their lens of the world, they will give you advice.
I agree, but I also don't agree. And you'll see in our newsletter when it comes out, a great quote from Steven Spielberg: the delicate balance of mentoring someone is not creating them in your own image, but giving them the opportunity to create themselves. And I think if we go through the good, like, pros and cons, I think that is one of the cons, is people who take on mentoring as an idea, as a way to give out advice and feel important, rather than to really understand what someone might need and really help them build themselves, which may not be the same thing or the same way that you would do it. And that's a very hard skill to get right.
I think it's a hard skill, but I would just say that they've been asked because they've gotten to a certain position. And so as long as you're caveating, I think genuinely people want to help over ego, but it is saying, look, I did this, it worked for me. I did this and it didn't work for me. Like, they only have one lived experience. So I think as long as it's clear that that advice is coming from one lived experience. But I do think it's quite different from a coach.
This is a much more formal, professional, often trained. There's often a certification involved. These are people who do this career for a job, coaches, not unlike a sports coach. So they effectively, their job is to help you develop your skills and toolbox for success. So they're not there to, the teach a person to fish. They're not there to tell you what to do. They're there to equip you with the skills and knowledge to be able to do it for yourself. We've talked to a range of coaches recently, probably about 20. And they disagree a little bit. And sometimes people have talked about having a coach who they stick with forever. And those are really deep relationships, and they are paid relationships, and they probably adapt over time. The vast majority of coaches, though, especially leadership coaches, seem to point to about 3 to 6 sessions. 6 seem to be the optimum, where you would come in with a specific blocker or issue or thinking pattern, and you would go through a little series of activities, and you'd have the accountability, and they would effectively help you build the tools to remove that obstacle. Anything I left out there?
No, I think they believe that you've got everything in you, and their job is to draw that out. So if you think of a sports coach, which is, common in my life with children, watching them go through sports, their coach isn't in there doing it for them, or, but they're preparing them so that they can go and do it for themselves. And so I think it is, absolutely paid. These are trained people. It's usually, because it is paid, it's typically women will get coaches once they're in senior positions. Either they can negotiate it as part of their pay packet. If they're stepping up into a role, that is a great a perk to negotiate as part of your package. Genuinely, as you're stepping way out of your comfort zone and you just need someone for 6 sessions to draw all of that confidence back out of you. You might just feel a little bit wobbly. The other time that when we've chatted with coaches, is it's when they've wanted a career change. So they just need to go back to square one with someone and have someone formally walk them through the process of, what am I good at? What do I love? And then the final thing is, if there is a relationship that's broken down in the workplace, I think a coach is a really great place to go. Maybe it might even only be 2 or 3 sessions, but just to get some solid tools under in your belt for you to go deal with conflict in the workplace can be a great reason to go get a coach.
I have loved having a coach. I had a coach for, I think it was a 6-session block, and again, life-changing. I'm a huge fan of all these things. Have you haven't had one?
No.
For me, again, an incredibly powerful tool. I've written in my notes, though, the one thing to be aware of with coaching is cost. And actually, it's quite interesting, because I've had some conversations recently about therapy, and that traditionally, and this might be, someone's opinion, but it spoke to me, therapy was designed to help people with mental illness. But what's happened is there's a massive gap between mental illness and high functioning all the time, no issues ever. And so what's happened, you've got the coaches at the top end, and they're way more expensive than therapists. Like, we're looking at $200 to $500 an hour, which is why often they're only available in senior leadership. Whereas therapy can often be in a little bit lower price bracket. So there's a lot of people like myself who would go to a therapist potentially for those issues in the middle, where I might not be battling with something that's an illness, but it's an issue. And what can happen there is that kind of throws up its own challenges, and that you've got these people who are trained in therapy trying to grapple with issues that are maybe sitting more towards what a coach would deal with, and building resilience and getting through a crisis. So I actually still think there's quite a big gap in the middle there of, how do we have access to that kind of questioning and help that we might need.
Democratize it.
Which I wonder, we're going to go on to sponsors next, but I wonder if that brings us to our peer group, because that is probably an affordable way to kind of get some of the benefits of a coach.
Yes, absolutely. And at the very start of Powrsuit, we went out and talked to hundreds of women, many whom have reached the pinnacles of their careers, because we're really trying to dig into what were the things that got you to where you got to. And one of the things they pointed to was a peer group. All of these credible women had anywhere between 6 to 8 women that they would meet with regularly, like not each week, but certainly at least once a month or once every 2 months. And they would meet with them and they would just support one another through all things career.
That's really sparked an idea for me because I have a bunch of friends who I talk to about work, which is actually, I don't think, that common. We are exceptionally good at building friendship bonds. We rely on each other for a lot of things, but and maybe it's stereotypical gender roles that women tend to not talk about work as much as we probably should. And we held those very early focus groups, and just bringing a group of women into the room was such a powerful, it was incredible watching these friends or strangers turn into somewhat of a peer group within the space of an hour and a half.
Yes.
It was very, very cool. So I think for me, one of my actions might be to put in a calendar invite for about 5 of us to just say, let's try this month to month, bring one challenge and see what we can grapple with
And
together.
anyone can do this. And that was the action we were hoping people would take away from this particular thing. It can be daunting to go ask someone to be a formal mentor, but it shouldn't be daunting to ask someone to go for a coffee. But you will have like-minded peers. Love the idea of taking very much a solutions approach and kind of what's the problem that we can solve as a group today? What are we all experiencing? What are we facing? And I mean, anyone can go out and ask a bunch of respected and admired colleagues today to do this.
And I wonder, I was actually thinking when I was thinking about doing this in the last 2 minutes, and that sort of raises another thing that I was like, oh, will you be in my peer group? And then I thought that's probably something that we shouldn't do, because one of the things about a peer group should be that they probably aren't people who you work with, because that could be your point to be able to go and get completely out of the situation, completely, objective, and be able to vent or be able to talk through things without having to feel there's any work-related stuff. I don't know what you think about that, because I think we would be fine. But
I think if it's a big enough organization and someone is a completely different kind of line manager and area than you in the business, I think it's okay. I think where a peer group is probably not a great place is if you're not able to be vulnerable and feel safe because that person happens to have the same manager as you. So I think that absolutely is something to be conscious of. Are we good to chat about sponsorship?
Yes, and Great. Maybe you kick into this one, because you have suggested that in North America this might be something that's a lot more formalized than I think it is here.
Well, I would love it to be formalized everywhere, because actually when you talk about inequity in the workplace, sponsorship is one of the key things to get more women into operational line manager roles, because very much like a board of directors, which you're often tapping people that you know, it's because you want to de-risk your reputation, and you've either worked with a person or you know that person operates well, and so you go to bat for that person. You're like, I want that person on my team. It could be senior leadership team, it could be board of directors, but that's how we get this idea of mirror-tocracy and everyone looking the same, because we tend to hang out with people we feel comfortable with, and that de-risks our situation, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the whole point of sponsorship for women in particular is to say you're going to identify women that are coming up in the organization specifically for strategic roles and for big responsibility in the business, because it's the only way women are going to get to the C-suite and have real power and influence in an organization. So sponsorship is shown to be a key equalizer to get women into those critical roles and to be having them work on strategic things, to have them be visible. So if you go to a meeting and someone says, we really need this project done, the sponsor goes, I know the perfect person to do this, and they're going to put your name forward, which gives you visibility, which gets your name out there and gives you the opportunity to work on something that otherwise you wouldn't have had the opportunity to. So I love sponsorship. I think every organization should be fostering them for up-and-coming women.
I love it, but unlike a coach, a mentor, or a peer group, I don't get to control this so much for myself, do I?
You should, in my opinion, you should be asking your organization for one, or you can go to an exec on the team and say, will you be my sponsor? I think if you're sitting in the C-suite, you have a responsibility, or a senior leadership role, you have a responsibility to sponsor people in your pipeline, and it should be minority and women that you're sponsoring, because traditionally they may not be putting their hands up for all sorts of reasons. Could be confidence, could be cultural, who knows? But it doesn't mean they're not capable of doing those things. So we should be, I just think it is absolutely, you're right in that you could go to someone to ask for a sponsorship and it might not be the person you choose, but I just think every senior leader has a responsibility to sponsor someone in their org.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
I just wonder, because all of these things are based on sort of an emotional connection and a sort of like becoming a mentor, a couple of the tips that I've seen on how to get a sponsor, let's say you don't have such a formal structure, because I think all these relationships work so much better when you both buy in. And I wonder if you are a busy leader in an organization and a total stranger comes up and says that and it's not a good match, or it's just, it will probably lead to all sorts of disarray. But we have talked a lot in the last few weeks, and we're going to be putting out some articles about more in terms of strategic yeses, because we've been talking a lot in the last few weeks about getting rid of a lot of stuff on your plate. We've talked about negative self-talk, taking on other people's problems, taking on everyone else's work, all these things, and sharing the household load. Check out on the website, we've got a whole bunch of great stuff about those things. But what that does, on top of freeing up a lot of brain space, is freeing up actual time. And so one of the ways that I've looked into just preparing for this, because I've never worked in an organization where there's a formal sponsorship thing, is showcase your value to someone who you would like to be a sponsor. So I think as smart, strategic women, we can look up further up in the organization and go, these are the sorts of people, or these are the people specifically that I think I would like to have as a sponsor. How can you show your value to them? And that is strategic yeses. That's not going and grabbing their coffee cup and washing it every day. That is helping them, if you're a specific expert in something, going above and beyond and telling them or giving them some information, making a point of potentially saving them some time, adding value so that you are now top of mind. And again, like all these other roles, apart from coach, an informal sponsor, I agree with you completely. They should be formal. But an informal sponsor, if you've done something that really attracts someone's attention and they go, this person's great at that, you will be top of mind next time they're in a situation thinking about who to put on a project team, or maybe who to think about for an opportunity. So you have a little bit of wiggle room there. And maybe once you build a relationship, that could well be a conversation you spark.
Yes.
I personally wouldn't start it cold.
It's a nice softly. No, I think it should be started cold from the top. Like,
yes,
I just think
agree.
It's outrageous.
Yeah.
And anyway, I digress.
Let's overthrow the system.
Well, we are at Powrsuit. The last thing I think we should say on the personal board of directors is that it is a relationship. So remember that you are kind of taking and asking people's time and their advice and their energy and their networks. And so please just respect that relationship. Are there little areas you talked about strategically you can help someone out? Are there, what is it? You said, didn't you say you bought your mentor a whiskey or a drink?
I'm claiming it. I'm not sure if I followed through.
Okay. Just remember, you show your appreciation. Even if it's just thank you for your time. That is so important, those graces of today. So please remember, it's a two-way street.
Absolutely. And I think the final action for today is, we talked at the top about 5 to 10 people on your personal board of directors. You don't need to have one of every single one of these roles on it. And at the moment, if I think about my life, I've probably got a couple of peer network, which I'm going to formalize a bit more. Great hot tip from today. A couple of informal mentors. But again, I think I'm going to take a little bit of a look and go, should I formalize that a little bit more? And we both share somewhat of a business/life coach.
Yes.
Unofficially. So
Jenny.
So that's probably, for me, that's actually a substantial amount for now. Like, you don't have to overcook this stuff.
No.
And if you don't have anything at the moment, and if you feel like you're alone navigating your career, start with one.
Yes.
Start by getting one of these things in place. And the lowest hanging fruit is the peer group. The next lowest hanging fruit is probably the mentor. When you get to coach and sponsor, there's a little bit more time, cost, effort involved. So kick off the easy ones first and just get started.
Yeah, no, I love it. So what we would love is, you are listening to this podcast. We would love if you just hit follow so that you can get notified for all of our new great episodes that drop. Hopefully this podcast was helpful enough. You want to show your appreciation and love by giving us 5 stars. Check out powrsuit.com. You can check out an article a little bit more on this, but also on governance and board of directors, which we alluded to as well, and lots of great tools and tips. You can sign up to our newsletter and get that into your inbox weekly. Catch us on socials and catch us next time. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.